All right, so we're talking about the eclipses and the north and south node. So you can't talk about one without the other. The eclipses come from the nodes, and it has to do with the orbits of the sun and the moon with respect to our perspective on Earth. And let's just jump right in. So we're going to talk about the eclipses, the nodes, the different houses and signs that they are in, which is why it's good for you guys to know where yours are so that you can follow along. And then we're going to talk about the astrological weather of the month. So why do they matter? Why do we even care about this? So they happen 4 times a year in sets of 2. So there's 2, a solar and a lunar eclipse coming in a series, one right after the other, twice a year, roughly about 6 months apart. But as you know, we don't see them, the sun get blotted out of the sky twice a year because they happen kind of all over the earth. But even though we're not seeing the eclipse directly in our location, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have an impact on our lives. And they're a disruption of the normal. So think about, back in the day, you're doing your thing, and all of a sudden the sun just disappears from the sky. That's pretty significant. That's pretty like, oh my gosh, what's going? This is the end times. Because the sun is our life giver. We wouldn't be alive, we wouldn't have life on this planet without the sun. So, since ancient times, it's pretty much been a bad omen, but we don't have to look at it as a bad omen. But a big example of the bad omen of the eclipses would be like the death of a king, which in a lot of the times where divine stature was attributed to the king or the monarch, that's like a big deal. But now we kind of can look at it more as an inversion of the natural order. That can be chaotic, but there can also be opportunity. Sometimes we don't see what we need to change in our life unless that flow and that natural vibration is interrupted and can kind of shake some things loose. As Kim brought up earlier, the nodes are also thought of as a karmic trajectory. So things where it is good to let go of or kind of move towards. But again, everything's kind of imbalanced. If we go too much in one direction or the other, that's going to create an imbalance and further disrupt that natural order. The other thing is you can think of them as a gate for change. So if there's something in your life that you really want to change, when you have an eclipse series in that part of your chart, it's a great opportunity to kind of like lean in to that change and kind of work with that and just like see what can happen when you dive in. So some mechanics, some science stuff over here. So the orbits of the Earth, the Sun, and the Moon aren't perfect. There's little wobbles and little differences of the planes of the orbit, and that creates wobbles where there are places where those orbits intersect. And I'll have a picture, I promise, right after this, so you can see it. And those intersections are where the North and the South node are. So right here, we have the Earth, we have the sun, and we have the moon. And yes, they know that the sun isn't moving around the earth, but the earth moves around the sun. But the nodes are points that are from our perspective on the earth. So where these different ecliptics intersect, you get your north and your south node. So the north node is where the moon is rising, and the south node is where the moon is setting. And yeah, these are, you can't visually see them, but they are important points that have to do with the ecliptics of the 2 luminaries, which are the brightest objects in the sky. So let's see, we are already in eclipse season. We just had a new moon, I believe it was on Tuesday earlier this week, and our next lunation will be an eclipse. So those 2 weeks before the first one and the 2 weeks after the second one, that whole month-long period is eclipse season. So we talked about the timing for eclipses, 2 in each series. And then, oh yeah, the nodes and the luminaries can be in different signs, which kind of, makes things a little bit more interesting. So towards the end of a nodal cycle, you could have the full moon be in, say, Gemini, and then the north node will be in Taurus. So They don't always have to be in the same sign, and that doesn't matter when you're looking at a chart. And then there's 3 eclipses in each series of the same sign-ish. You know, it can be a little hazy. There could be like a 4th tiny one. And then the nodes go through the signs in 19-year cycles. And then they're roughly 18 months in a sign. So if you have your North Node in Gemini right now, then you'd be having your nodal return. So this is like a period of intense kind of karmatic things happening in your life where you're kind of confronted with your choices and you need to decide if you want to keep going or if you want to change your directions. So there can be a similar intensity level to, say, a Saturn return. The nodes always move in a retrograde motion, which means they're going backwards. They go through the signs backwards. The next sign that they'll be in after Gemini, or the North Node, will be in Taurus and Scorpio. And then when you're looking at a chart, if the new or the full moon happens within 15 degrees of the node, then that's considered an eclipse. But as with all aspects, the tighter the orb, the more intense the eclipse or the aspect will be. So 3 degrees or closer is a total eclipse. Lunar eclipses happen on the full moon. Solar eclipses happen on the new moon. And if it's a North Node eclipse or a South Node eclipse, that's determined by where the moon is. So when you're looking at an eclipse in your chart or in general, the 3 questions that you're asking are, is it lunar and solar? Is it a North or a South Node eclipse? And what is the intensity of that eclipse? So we saw that. So then this is just, I'm a picture person, so I need visuals. So this is kind of what is happening when a solar eclipse happens. The sun is here, the earth is here, and the moon is blocking out the sun. And that's why it looks like the sun disappears, because it just kind of perfectly lined up to prevent or occlude us from seeing the sun. And again, you can see here that it's, let's see, you can see here that it's just this little place right here where you have the total eclipse, but everywhere here there is a partial eclipse. But again, even if we're not being directly hit by the eclipse, that we are still being affected by it energetically. And so then this is a lunar eclipse. And I just thought this was interesting about why it was red. And so the earth is actually blocking the sun for the moon in this case. And it's because we have the atmosphere that we scatter the blue light that it looks red. And I just thought that was really interesting because, you know, like a bright red moon in the sky, like back in the day when people were like, what is happening? Like that also, you can see how that's a very dramatic and, you know, scary thing. And all these different cultures have lore around all of these. So usually the red eclipse, it's like, you know, some monster is bleeding and like there's war omens and things like that. So we can think of the eclipses these days as gates. I think that's a useful analogy when you're trying to harness the power of the eclipse in your own life and try and use this to create positive changes for yourself. So it's moving through duality. There's light and darkness, the conscious and the subconscious, and these things are inverted. So we reside in our conscious minds. That's our rational thinking mind of how we go through the day, do our job, pay our taxes, interact with people. We have this vast ocean of the subconscious that's always affecting us. And a lot of our reactions or the way we see the world is colored by our subconscious, even if we're not aware of it. So the eclipses are a great opportunity to have those subconscious influences, impulses, mental constructs that aren't necessarily serving us come to the forefront so that we can address that and kind of see what's going on down there and decide, well, do I want to be reacting from this place or do I want to change that so I'm more aware of how I'm seeing the world? So, yeah. So this is an analogy that I like. So if you think of a tree, the leaves and the beautiful foliage and flowers, that's all the conscious mind. But all the nutrients for that is being pulled from the roots. We can't see the roots. So we can't tell, like, are the roots, sick? Are they all going one direction? Are they getting a little bit crowded? So this is a great opportunity to see our roots, but any change to the root system can be very unsettling as much as it is meaningful. So doing this work is kind of like deep and intense, and you all know I love that. But be gentle with yourself if you're doing this type of work, because it can be really intense. So then, I don't know if you guys are into Sailor Moon at all. That was like my favorite books growing up, and it's an anime. But there's this whole there's 5 like mini series within the whole manga or anime, and the 4th one is all about an eclipse. So eclipse happens, and these kind of bad guys come in, or the evil moon circus. But also, this beautiful Pegasus unicorn also comes in and gives them new powers and new ways to expand themselves to end up kind of defeating the evil moon circus. I think that's a good way of thinking about this, because although eclipses can bring trials and tribulations, they also bring these wonderful, beautiful powers and insights that we aren't aware of. And you kind of can't have one without the other. So it's like that analogy, the brighter the flame, the darker the shadow. So you have to look at how both of these are coming up, and how, maybe these more intense, rigorous, emotional trials are also bringing us great rewards and insights about ourselves, which I kind of think is like the point of being human. So we have the solar eclipse. So any questions so far? I know I'm kind of like throwing a lot at you and just kind of going through this. Okay. So we have our solar versus our lunar eclipse. So again, the solar is the moon occluding the sun, and then the lunar is when the moon becomes red at night. So solar eclipses are disruptions to our consciousness, our identifications, our priorities, what I think is important and what is important to make me who I am. These are all things that are affected by solar eclipses. A lot of times associations with solar eclipse are vision. So like losing your vision or having visions. So both physically and metaphorically, there's a reason why they tell you not to look at the sun. Reassessing what we identify with. So when people ask you what you do, usually you're like, this is my job. So that's kind of what you say you are and what you identify with, and what makes up the bulk of how you consider yourself your own person. It's like me, Megan McGonigal. Someone will ask me who I am, and I'll say, oh, I'm an acupuncturist, I'm an astrologer. But are these really who I am? Why do I identify with that? Why is it that, not something else? These are all things you would grapple with if a solar eclipse is really hitting your chart hard. And then also, how do we enforce our self-sovereignty? So I think women in particular really grapple with that. Women are taught to be kind of people pleasers and always put themselves last. So do you have a sense of self-sovereignty? Are you able to assert boundaries in your life? I think that the solar eclipses are great opportunities to kind of see if you do have any self-sovereignty, how you enforce that, and are there ways that could change? Lunar eclipses are a little bit more about our material attachments. So the moon, if you're thinking about what each planet rules, so the sun rules the self, which is why kind of all those identity aspects are associated with that. But the moon rules all created things. So like, what does that mean? So things that are material, things that are your body, your sensations that you have, things that you make, that materiality of the world, that's what the moon is about. You think about what the moon does on our planet. It rules the tides, it moves material aspects. Different animals like clams, even if they've done experiments, or even if you put them in a dark room, they'll like open up when the moon cycle comes through. So animals are very in tune with the moon and the moon cycles. You can think of it as like the Maya or the Matrix, that the illusion of physicality that we exist in. So with lunar eclipses, we can ask ourselves, are we in tune with these cycles that happen? Are we resisting these cycles? Are we trying to hold on to something that we need to let go of? Or are we trying to build something with sand and it's just not the time to build that? It's about thinking of where we are and what the cycle is, and are we fighting against nature? It's like that Roman king that like was really mad at Poseidon or whatever, Neptune, and like brought his army to go to war with the ocean. So don't be literally beating waves. The waves are always going to win, but you could surf the waves to get to where you're going. So now we get to the nodes in general. So they disrupt the area of the chart that they're present in. So we've gone over before the different significations of the houses. So think about which houses your nodes are in, and that's going to color and change the aspect of that house and any planets that happen to fall in that house. In Vedic astrology, the nodes are just as important as the visible planets. So it's like when you're learning astrology, you learn about like the sun and the moon. In Vedic astrology, you also learn about the north and south node, Ketu and Rahu. And in Vedic astrology, they're included in Time Lord and timing techniques, just like any other planet. Psychologically, they can represent the principles of attraction and repulsion. So the North Node is what you're attracting in or you're trying to attract to. And the South Node is like where you're like, oh no, get it away from me. So when you're thinking about the nodes, think about balance, imbalance, and like recalibration. Again, the nodes are always working together. So if you go too far in one direction or the other, there's not going to be balance in your chart. And so you need to kind of think about it more as like a seesaw or a teeter-totter, and you're trying to continually balance that. Dragon symbolism. So the nerd in me loves this part. So dragon symbolism with the nodes is like everywhere. So cultures, places, times, like everyone has used dragon symbolism to talk about the nodes. Vedic astrology, Tibetan astrology, all this different medieval literature, Arabic astrology texts, Hebrew texts, all different types of Latin. They all use dragons when they're talking about the symbol or the nodes. So in Vedic astrology, it's probably most prevalent because the North Node is the head and the South Node is the tail of the dragon, but that's definitely everywhere. So we have dragons as a metaphor of transformation. They represent both enlightenment, chaos, and the wild. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Rahu and Ketu myth. That is the Vedic astrology myth that are tied to the nodes. So it's a creation myth. They're in different, it's like a different pantheon of gods and goddesses than maybe we're used to over here in America, because we tend to default to more Greek or different European myths. But just like that, Hindu has a creation myth. So there are Devas and Asuras, which were different godlike factions. You can think of them as kind of like maybe the fallen angels versus, God's angels, but that's totally, don't take that literally. And so they're working together to create existence, and they're churning an ocean together, that out of that churning ocean, material existence comes out. So although they're two warring factions, they're like, okay, let's get together and we'll turn this ocean to have material existence come out, because although we're at war with each other, we can agree that material existence is a good thing. So one of the things to come out of the ocean was a nectar of the god called Amrit. And everyone wanted this. They were like, yes, this is the food, this is the drink, we want this. And we're gonna now, even though they were working together to create existence, now the two factions are fighting over who gets to have this wonderful nectar of the gods. So now is where there's different versions of the myth, and some there was trickery on both sides, and some the like good guys, were the ones that should have had it. But everyone can agree that there is this one serpent god, sorry, excuse me, that really wanted this nectar. And so he changed his appearance to kind of sneak in and be one of the good guys to go and get it. And unfortunately for him, he was seen by the sun and the moon. And the sun and the moon realized that he was being a tricky guy, and we're gonna go tell on him to Vishnu, who is one of the main guys who keeps creation in order. So to prevent his cover from being blown, the snake god Safar Banu ate the sun and the moon. He was like, no, I want this nectar. You're not taking it away from me, so I'm going to eat you. You can't have creation or earth without the sun and the moon. So Vishnu, the head honcho, had to come and sort everything out and be like, no, you need to let the sun and the moon go. So he ended up cutting Sparbanu, the serpent god, in half so that the sun and the moon could be released and we could have day and night in the natural order back. But unfortunately, the snake god had already eaten a bunch of the god nectar, so he became immortal. So even though they cut him in half, he didn't die. And that's how we get the north and the south node. And the north and the south node are thought to be Sparbanu continually chasing after the sun and the moon because he's so mad at them for ratting him out. So they place him on opposite sides, which is why the nodes are on opposite sides, and his like angry chasing keeps churning the ocean that material existence comes out. And sometimes he does get his revenge because he does swallow the sun and the moon, which are eclipses, and that's when we get the eclipses. But because he's cut in half, he can never keep them inside of him and they come right out. So let's see. So the North Node, or Rahu, or the head of the dragon. So a lot, as we kind of talked about earlier, in evolutionary astrology, they think a lot about how we're moving from the South Node to the North Node. But why I think that there's a little bit more to that is because the North Node can also indicate just increase in general. In medieval astrology, if that's just what it was associated with. There was none of that karmic evolutionary movement or life path that we kind of think about today. It just was increased. So wherever the North Node was, it would increase that. So say it was conjunct Jupiter, you're increasing good luck. Awesome. Say it's conjunct Saturn. All right, maybe you're kind of increasing a malefic. So we gotta see what we can do about that. So that's why I think just in general, moving towards it in a chromatic way, it also is kind of this hunger for success and materiality. And it's very hot and ambitious. So although we want to move towards that, it's the hungry ghost. It always wants more and more and more and more and more. So I don't think we should just keep moving towards that because that's going to feed that ceaseless hunger. And we don't know that's just not good for everyone to just want to keep consuming and keep eating and keep wanting that materiality. Some of that's good. You got to have some ambition to kind of get out of the house, but there needs to be a balance to that. So the South Node, K2, is decrease. Also kind of what we're letting go of, past lives. But also with the past lives, it can be like inheritance or unusual gifts or talents that you just kind of take for granted. You're like, oh, everyone can like sing beautifully. It's like, no, you just like have that, and because it's such a part of your nature, you don't understand that other people have to work for that. the past, but also where we need to let go. So when we're too into Rahu, we're eating and eating and we're craving, and we need to kind of lean into the South Node, which is about letting go or purging to kind of balance that out. But the same is true with someone that's like really into their South Node, where they're maybe like extreme asceticism and they're like, I don't need any ties to this world. But no, we do need some ties to this world. And so if you're feeling like not attached or you're feeling disassociated from the world around you, kind of leaning more into that North Node. So that's what I said earlier about it kind of being a teeter-totter, where you need both of these things. So this is a quote from Austin Keppek, who's probably one of my favorite astrologers ever. Nodes have their own sense of gravity. When you get too close to one, it will try to take over and be the only game in town. Our goal is to stitch the head and the tail together and remember that we're riding, that it's one great beast that we're riding. So I think that that's something that maybe current astrology gets wrong, is like too much emphasis on the North Node and not seeing that they work together as a unit. And we need both of those in order to be in balance, and kind of having that South Node supports our North Node and vice versa. So, okay, so now that we know what eclipses are, now that we know what nodes are, what happens when we put them together? So, let's see what we got here. We have an eclipse on the head or on the North Node, and remember, with a solar eclipse, it doesn't really matter. Both the sun and the moon will be on there, but on a lunar eclipse, you want to look at where the moon is to decide if it's an eclipse on the head or the tail. So on the head, we have further commitment or solidification of our ego attachment. So that will bring priority to this area of life. So say it was in your first house, this eclipse series, or there was an eclipse on the head, you would be thinking about your identity and how you put yourself out there in the world. And so it's like kind of about you right now. Whereas the opposite, if it was in your seventh house that this head or North Node eclipse was happening, it'd be kind of about your partners and your relationships. And it's time for you to take a more backseat role to support the people around you. And then that amplifying hot, ambitious quality. So it's like, it's go time. Like you are going to want to go, you're going to want to focus on this, and you're going to want to just kind of like keep going in this area of life. So say it was in your 11th house that the North Node eclipse was happening, it'd be like you were all about being social, you want to be out and about, like prioritizing that area of your life. So it's good to know what house it's in, because then you know kind of where to focus, and that's where the energy is. So to kind of go with where the energy is. On the tail, these ones can be like a little bit more difficult because it's about letting go of things. So surrendering, which I think we all have trouble with, knowing that there's a plan and not trying to force your will onto things, but just kind of letting events unfold, even if it's painful and you know that, or you think that you know that you can affect it, knowing that it's better if you don't interfere and just kind of like let it happen. And these can be a little destructive, and yeah, so these ones are a little bit more difficult, but I think it's more difficult because we always want to do something and we always want to help, and it's more difficult to kind of witness something happen without being involved. All right, so yeah, so these are just kind of the house polarities of where the nodes are. Let's see. So we have the angular houses, which are the 1st, 7th, the 4th, and the 10th. Let's see, do I have a picture of just a chart so I could show this to you a little bit more? Okay. Sure. Okay, so this is just a current chart. Just so what this is just the chart of right now, just so you guys can see a chart when I'm talking about this. So the angular houses are the first, the seventh, the fourth, and the 10th. So angular houses in all forms of astrology are just like the big players, like who am I? Who am I with? Where do I live? What am I doing as a job? Like if you want to become an astrologer, that's like what people are going to come and ask you about. So these are like the main guys. They're the pillars that are holding up your chart. Um, and then nodes in these areas are a little bit more dramatic because they're affecting things that have a bigger deal and have more meaning in your life. The succeeding houses, which are the two, the eighth, yes, the fifth, and the 11th. So these are kind of like your resources. So material, so money, other people's money, but also your kind of more creative resources. So it could be your children or kind of just your innate artistic talents. And then your social group are also resources, although they're more soft resources. You people that'll support you, that will help you out, things like that. And then the cadent houses, which are the third, the ninth, the sixth, and the 12th. So these are the problem solving houses. So things to solve. So how do I get to the grocery store? What am I traveling? How am I going to get there? The sixth, do I have a health problem? How do I solve any health problems I have? And then the 12th house, any mental health issues or just spiritual issues like why am I here? So although important, you don't really worry about that if you don't know who you are or have a place to live, if that makes sense. So the first and the seventh house, let me go back now. There we go. So the first and the seventh house are kind of like independence versus autonomy. So prioritizing your needs versus the needs of others. So say you have your north node in the first house, you have issues with codependency. So you're used to just kind of like other people being around and helping you solve your problems. So you need to learn how to kind of be your own person and stand on your own 2 feet and maybe not be so willing to get everyone else's opinion on what you should do. The opposite of that, if you have the south node in the first and the north node in the seventh, you need to learn to rely on people like a little bit. You got a lot of walls there that are difficult to break down, and you need to kind of let other people in so that you can, experience vulnerability. And with transits through these houses, it shifts towards kind of like you doing you or breaking up with people. Like transits, north node transits through the seventh house can often end up in purging relationships or a breakup. But if your relationship makes it through that, it's like really strong. So again, not scary, but just like things to think about. The second versus the eighth. So issues of mine versus yours and transfers of funds and resources. So the north node, let me see, I have a story about this. So north node in the second, south node in the eighth. So my mom during her third, she has this. Her north node is in the second and her south node is in the eighth. And during her third nodal return, she and my dad moved and she had like never really known. She grew up in an age where like men took care of finances a lot, and her and my dad had an arrangement where like he did more of that, but then their situations changed. My mom had to take more of a driver's seat in that regard, and she had to learn like what a credit score was and all of this stuff, and it was really scary for her, and she didn't love knowing about that. But eventually they bought a house and it was all in her name, like the lease and everything. Like it was all based on her income and like all these different things. So that was like a huge deal for her, and it was definitely kind of scary to go through, but she feels more secure and in control of her financial future now. Not that my dad's like not there or not in the picture, but just, you know, I don't know if you ever bought a house, but like you need to like work things in a certain way to like get the best deals and everything like that. So that was just like a really interesting North Node in the second nodal return all kind of coming together. The opposite of that, if you have the South Node in the second, the North Node in the eighth, is you kind of need to just sit with other people having more control over your resources. And that one can be kind of tough, but you just need to like know it's not about like you getting standing on your own 2 feet financially. It's about like sitting with the vulnerability that other people are in control of that and like learning how to rely on others. And again, um, you know, get in touch with vulnerability and being okay with that. So with transits, you can see a lot of like legal payouts, debt stuff, um, acknowledging support from others, divorce settlements, things like that. Third and the ninth. So this one's like a little lofty. So some people have trouble visualizing this. It's like tensions of the priority of your day to day versus pursuing those lofty dreams. So the North Node in the third versus the South Node in the ninth, it can be like the spirituality of the everyday. You need to be more grounded, more like here and now. This is what I'm doing. Whereas the other reverse is like get out of your day to day, go on the adventures, chase the dreams. Like you need to think big instead of be in command of your immediate surroundings. And then for the transits, this is what I like to think: is it time to write this screenplay or is it time to fix the dishwasher? So you need to kind of see where you are in those eclipses. So then the fourth and 10th, so it's the access of achievement of what you put out in the world versus kind of like your home life and support pillars. So the North Node in the fourth, South Node in the 10th, usually you have like a calling, and it's just like you need to accept that that's like what you're going to do so that you can have more focus in your home environment. Whereas people that have North Node in the 10th, they're very high achievers and they might be like overachievers, like people that have like 3 to 4 master's degrees, and you're like, why do you need that many? And usually when you have transits, it's like, are you being dragged out into the spotlight or are you being dragged home to kind of deal with your family situation? And then we have the 5th and the 11th. So this is like the arty access. So like a lot of famous artists like Pablo Picasso or just like, I don't know, a lot of art people or really creative people have this. And it's just like there's a lot of juice along this creative access. So North Node in the 5th house, it's like you can't listen to what other people are telling you, like stay true to your creative vision. People aren't going to get you until you kind of put it out into the world. So by listening to other people, that will kind of push you off your track to realizing your true creative vision. And then the opposite of that is you could be a little bit more hesitant to let people see, and you need to lean into the collective a little bit more and be willing to put yourself out there and let people actually see your work that you're creating. And so then with transits, it's like you need to start thinking about how you impact others. If it's a transit to your 11th house, or it's like time to like take a break from social media and just kind of like cloister and do your thing without any disruptions. And then the 6th and 12th house polarity. So problems of the body, the mind, and the soul. Where is the root cause of these issues? Are you getting sick from your kind of thoughts, or you know, just is it a soul level issue that's manifesting on the physical? So with North Node in the sixth house, it's about kind of bringing maybe those more creative, spiritual, elusive concepts to the material world. How can I express this in a concrete way? Whereas if the North Node's in the 12th house, like, I don't know, like go get lost in space. The root of your problems are probably more spiritual or mental, and it's creating more of a disease type situation. And transits are, you know, is a time to work on your health, or is a time, or and meditate, or is a time to kind of come back to earth and you know, ground out a little bit. How are you guys doing? Any questions so far? No? Okay. Okay, so now we've a lot of pieces that we're putting together. We have the eclipses, we have the nodes, we have what houses the nodes are in, and now we have the signs that the nodes are in. And when you're looking at your chart, you're combining all of these together. So with the Aries Libra axis, it's kind of about the need to be me versus the need to belong, but also about energy expenditure. Aries like goes all in. It's like, let's do it all right now. Who cares about 2 seconds from now? Whereas Libra's like, let's think about this a little bit more. Let's like finesse it a little bit. Let's like, you know, make this look better a little bit more. So when you have North Node in Aries and South Node in Libra, you need to kind of overcome your people pleasing tendencies. So you need to be a little bit more direct in your needs, and you don't need a consensus about the right thing to do. You just need to like be more in tune with what you know the right thing to do is. Whereas the opposite of that is, you know, maybe let's like have a little bit more diplomacy over that direct action. Kind of like, if you know you're right, but if you don't say it in a way that ingratiates you to others, you're not going to get the support you need in order to kind of take that direct action. So it's about, this access is about taking all of that raw energy that Aries has and like smoothing it out a little bit in a way that's more palatable. The Taurus Scorpio axis. So I also, just like side note, really like thinking about the signs as dualities like this, as two sides of the same coin. I think it helps understand the signs in a different way. So you have, so with the Aries and Libra, like Aries is about me, Libra is about we. So but that's two sides of the same coin. Like, you can't really be present in a relationship unless you know who you are, and you can't flourish who you are to a degree that you would want without the support of others to kind of bring that out of you. So I just think it's like an interesting thought exercise. So like, I know a lot of people do sun sign astrology, so most people are familiar with like, who am I? So I think it would be interesting for you to kind of think about the opposite of that, of whatever that sun sign is, and see how you kind of feel about that, and see if there's anything that that opposite sign can kind of teach you and enhance about your individual sign. So anyway, I digress. So speaking of that, I actually really love the Taurus Scorpio axis. I think this is one of the more interesting ones, and I can't tell you how many couples I know that are Scorpio and Taurus. It's like, for some reason, they just like get each other, and they like get what each other needs. And so I think that the nodes are interesting on this axis as well, because they're both kind of intense signs. So North Node in Taurus, South Node in Scorpio. So learning to embrace stability and substance. With that South Node in Scorpio, there's maybe like some drama that they're used to, and how do you kind of escape that drama and embrace a more stable life. And learning to accrue resources without like hoarding or going through these like intense, like I want all the resources, oh I don't want any resources, like regulating your attachments to materialism instead of being so extreme about it. So the Scorpio will be like, okay, yeah, let's be a millionaire, or all of money is evil, let's get rid of all of it. And the leaning into the Taurus would look like maybe like, okay, I need some resources to live and survive in the world. So let's create like small, steady steps to create a stable income for myself. The opposite of that is just kind of embracing change and letting go of needing to know where everything comes from, going into the unknown and, you know, just like seeing what's out there, but trying not to become too addicted to being like an adrenaline junkie. There'll be a lot of drama and danger, and that can be really exciting and alluring. And, you know, again, kind of this north and south node works together. So knowing that you do need to let go of being uptight a little bit, but jumping out of a plane every single weekend might be a little bit overkill.
Megan.
Oh, yes.
Sorry.
That's
So, okay, so I was in a, I took an astrology class or whatever. So one of the girls, one of the astro girls in my class, this is her nodes. So
Mhm.
she has the flip side, like her north node is in Scorpio, her south node is in Taurus. So Taurus, you know, I have Taurus rising. So Taurus likes comfort. They don't like change. They're like you know, they get stuck in ruts and things like that. And Scorpio likes to go deep into the unknown. And, you know, I mean, you know, I've studied a lot about this stuff. So I'm just listening to you and everything. And so, no, it's just all, and then Aries and Libra. Libra is like, likes to take charge and be in control. And Libra likes, you know, everything equally balanced and harmony and, you know, everything like that. And like they're the scale. So they want everything equally balanced. And so, no, I just wanted to
Yeah.
thank you. I'm just,
And it's interesting. What I like about the nodes with the opposite axis is like, how do we find balance between them? So, for example, with the Taurus and Scorpio, I find that Taurus is like a container for deep experience. So that's how they can like work together. And Aries and Libra can like learn from each other. Um, you know, what if it's not in balance for a little bit? Like, is that the end of the world? And then Libra is like, well, but what if we took all of this crazy intense energy and spread it out a little bit so that you didn't go from like 0 to 100 back down to 0? So like we could spread this energy out and then it would be more sustainable. So yeah, I think like you're saying, the signs, especially the opposite ones, and when you're talking about the nodes, like have a lot to learn from each other. Thank you. um, yeah. So yes, then we have Gemini and Sagittarius. So I think this is an interesting one. Um, so you got North Node Gemini, South Node Sagittarius. So this can kind of be like struggling to articulate visions and justify the direction that you want to go so that other people can understand. So South Node is like a visionary, and they don't necessarily need to work in a verbal way, but Gemini is very verbal. It needs to talk about it. It needs to communicate. It needs to write it down. It needs to like have the details. So if you're getting these like impulses or visions from Sagittarius, then it can be, you need to kind of, your struggle could be articulating that in a way that makes sense to other people. So it's like, how do you describe a feeling if you have difficulty articulating that? But then the opposite of that is like me letting go of the need to explain and categorize everything and just be like, yeah, it's like wild and wonderful out there. And I don't need to kind of categorize what I'm feeling for it to be real. And I don't need other people to understand it for it to be true to me. So kind of like the child mind versus the sage mind. So taking things apart in order to know how it works versus synthesizing everything together in a way that makes sense. So both signs are about embracing contradiction. You know, we got a centaur, which is a contradiction between horse and person. And Gemini is all about duality. It's the two twins. And I don't know if you know anybody that has a lot of Gemini. It's like each day it's a different person, it's a different way of being. But the Gemini is about kind of taking things apart, and the Sagittarius is about trying to put everything together. So, yeah, it's like this one's kind of about building and breaking down and how they can learn from each other in that regard. And how about having different approaches is okay. And you know, there can be a time for synthesizing and a time for, you know, just waiting around, or not waiting around, but taking things in and learning.
So Megan, also too, like, is it true, like, Sagittarius is professor and Gemini is the student?
Mm-hmm. So that would be sage and child for sure. Um, yeah, I think Gemini is like a little bit more than that though. I think student, sure, but it's more that they're just like interested in everything. Like you think of Mercury and all the myths, he like wanted, he was like a little trickster, he was a little devious, he wanted to do all the things. Whereas one of the most famous centaurs was Chiron, who like taught all of the heroes to be heroes. So it's like he had a lot of the answers, but he still was like learning from other people. He just was really good about putting things together in a way that like helped his particular students learn. And he also had a contradiction because he was the healer that couldn't heal himself. So I think Sagittarius can be about embracing things going. It's about, so Gemini would need to know why, needs to know why, but Sagittarius can just like accept contradictions as is and doesn't need to know why. It can just accept that they're the differences between things.
And it has the duality because it's the twins. So
Yeah, both signs have a duality.
yeah.
All right, the Cancer and Capricorn axis. We're all pretty familiar with this one after 2020. That was like all about the Cancer Capricorn axis. So yeah, the Cancer Capricorn's about kind of letting go versus keeping safe. So with the North Node in Cancer and South Node in Capricorn, it's I call this the like Scrooge catharsis. So not to say that anyone who has this is a Scrooge, but I'm thinking more at the end when he like wakes up and he's like, money's not everything. Like I need to go see my nephew because family and like relationships matter. So like letting go of needing that self-contained practicality to like let in emotions even though they're messy. And like what will make that person happy. Like Scrooge could keep getting more material things, but that wasn't making him happy. What made him happy was like finally learning that, you know, it's okay to be vulnerable and like let other people in and talk and laugh and like take the day off. And then the opposite of that is like, maybe you need to tough it up a little bit there, buddy. So you know, so cancers, I have a lot of good friends that have like a lot of cancer in them, and they can be like really sensitive. So, you know, maybe building up some of that armor to be like a little bit more objective because cancer has a tough time being objective because they're very in their experience. And they have a difficult, Cancer just in general has a difficult time seeing things from the outside. They're ruled by the moon. They are what they're feeling all of the time. So it can be hard to understand that there are people outside of that experience having a different experience. And so learning about that, learning that just because we have differences doesn't mean one of us is wrong, is part of that trajectory. So the axis of this is hardness versus softness. So like, where is the line between comfort and security? And when does a house just stay a house? When does it become a home? Kind of where are these walls, and are they helping keep us safe, or are they keeping everyone out? So this axis asks a lot of those questions. Then Leo Aquarius axis. So I like love this axis. I don't have like, I have like no Leo, and I wish I did because it seems fun. And I have like a few Aquarius, but like not much. But I don't know, this axis, for some reason, it just like makes me laugh a little bit, because I feel like it's such an interesting dichotomy of like the Leo, the monarch, and then like Aquarius, the like collective trying to dethrone the monarch. And I don't know why, but I just like that a lot. So North Node in Leo, South Node in Aquarius. So this is like learning to embrace life as a participant. Like, you are here, be your own main character. Like, stop trying to like, keep people away. Stop trying to keep out of the drama. Like, be part of the drama. Life is about being part of the drama. Why we like plays and movies is because we're caught up in a compelling drama. Just like learn to embrace that. And like, be your own main character. You are not meant to be a supporting role. But then the opposite of that is like, you are a part of an ensemble. So like, stop trying to hog the spotlight. Like, learn to that there is more than just kind of like what your thoughts and feelings are, and like know the power of being able to rely on others, like in that ensemble cast. So the prima donna versus the audience, like, they need each other. Like, the prima donna doesn't exist without the audience being there, and the audience gets fulfillment through projecting onto this character. And so it's like that needs of the one versus the needs of the many. So like a little Star Trek reference in there. So like, too much emphasis on the collective stifles that spark and creativity of the individual that like is beautiful and important, and like, you need that because like our job is to be an individual. But too much emphasis on the individual creates like a lot of problems that I feel like we see in America, that erodes the social and collective cohesion. So there needs to be a balance. We're social animals, but we're also unique souls. So how can we balance that? And then the Virgo Pisces axis. So North Node Virgo, South Node Pisces. So to be creative, like, creativity can be practical. You can be inspired by the wondrous, but like, we live in material existence, and we need to like bring it back down. So disappearing into the cosmic soup doesn't help pay the bills. And North Node Virgo people, like, we need to learn to pay the bills. The opposite of that, though, is like, the world can be messy. Like, it's okay to have some mess, and it's okay to be full of contradiction, and it's okay to like let go a little bit, and just kind of go into the wonder of like what it means to be part of this collective. So yeah, both signs are very aware of the world around us, but it's like the access of materiality to etheric. And like, where can we meet? Where can they inspire each other? Where can where can we let go and be more aware of the spirituality, or where do we need to like bring that spirituality into like inspiration for new practical ways of doing things. Oh yeah, and then a lot of shamanistic practices say that reality was dreamed into existence, and I just feel like that really sums up this access a lot. All right, so any questions before we go on to the weather? Okay, so this is from last month. It was like, how's Uranus going to spice things up during the usually calm and stable Taurus season? And I feel like it really has been. So I just wanted to keep that in there, because like, as I kept talking about last year, like this year was going to be about like Uranus entering the chat, and I really feel like it has. So Uranus is here, and it's going to keep being here. So let's see, what did I want to bring up? Oh, also, well, we'll talk about this in a minute, but like Jupiter's in Pisces. Yes, so we got to enjoy that while we can. But okay, so we have the second exact Saturn Aquarius square on June 14th, which is also squaring the moon in Leo. So like, I don't know, keep an eye out for that day, see what happens there. And then,
Excuse me, Megan.
yeah,
I'm sorry to bother you. So, so Pisces entered Jupiter, right?
yes, Jupiter entered Pisces, yeah.
And so Jupiter is the planet of expansion. So wherever that falls in your house, that's going to be expanded.
Yeah, and Jupiter is, so this is like pretty sweet because one of Jupiter's traditional rulers is Pisces. So Jupiter hasn't had power in like a while. It has been like at the suppressed by Saturn for like 2 years now. And so Jupiter is finally free of that influence and can like do Jupiter things unimpeded. So yeah, there's like a double-edged sword here because like, you know, Jupiter can like grow if it doesn't have anyone being like, maybe that's too much. But I feel like we've had a year of repression, so I think it's going to be like kind of fun. And it's interesting because like everything is opening up right now. Jupiter is getting the power, and one of Jupiter's significations is remediation of harm. And part of why 2020 was so difficult was because Jupiter had no power and no ability to remediate any of the harm that was happening from Saturn, Mars, and Pluto. So now that Jupiter has some power, it can like help us out. So it goes retrograde. It's only in for like a month or two. But I mean, I would enjoy this while it's here. Did you have anything else to say about that, Kim?
I'm sorry to keep interrupting, but also Jupiter is the planet of expansion. So wherever it falls in your house, and then it's also about what did I read? So it's like, okay, so if it falls in say your I don't know, say like if it falls in my second house where my Gemini is located, so that amplified as far as wealth and different things like that based on where, because isn't it if it falls in a certain house, that house is exemplified, and whatever that house rules, certain thing, you know what I'm trying to say? You know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, as with any transit, as a planet is going around your chart, any house that it's in is going to bring attention to that matter.
Right.
So, say you had Jupiter, say you had Pisces in your 10th house. So Jupiter going in there is going to start expanding or bringing positive attention to career matters. Say it was going into your 7th house. It might like, if you're single, like maybe it's time to get on the
Right.
yeah.
Right.
So yeah, so just thinking about what that house signifies, as with all transits, is important to keep in mind. and kind of like what we were saying with where your nodes are, where those houses are, or what house it's in, it's going to bring attention to that matter.
Okay, so it's basically now is it only affected if you have Pisces, if it's like you look at the extended chart, so wherever that Jupiter is transiting, if it's not transiting in my chart in Pisces, it's only affecting Pisces, right? Or is it affecting all the houses, all the different signs?
Anything that's in aspect to it. So say you
Okay.
have like a bunch of planets in Virgo, it's going to be opposing that, so it's going to affect that.
Okay.
It's like think of the chart as like an environment or an ecosystem. So like changing
Right.
one thing is going to affect everything else. But because Jupiter is expansion and, as you said, and has a lot of power, but is also hope, optimism, buoyancy, I think that it's going to be positive for whatever area of your life it's falling into.
And it's like a window. It's only based on that window of time that you have that opportunity to kind of grasp that.
Yeah. So yeah, all transits are time limited, but this is just the first taste. It's gonna retrograde back into Aquarius. I think I have the date here.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it goes retrograde the 21st, and I didn't put the day it goes back into Aquarius. I think it's like early July, maybe it's mid-July. And then it's gonna go back to Aquarius for like the rest of the year. But then in 2022, it's gonna go back into Pisces again and stay there for like 9 months. So
Oh,
think of
okay.
this as like a little taste of things to come. So usually when we think about big transits, we think we get 3 hits. So it's kind of like the first hit of the sweet, sweet Jupiter and Pisces juice that we
So it's
all
so
love.
it so it's kind of like teasing us.
Yeah, it's like a little teaser, exactly. So
Okay.
I don't think that like we're out of the woods yet, but I think this is like a nice little reprieve or vacation that we're gonna get for a few weeks that will give us the energy to kind of keep slogging through the rest of the Uranus Saturn square we're getting for the rest of this year.
And Uranus is, yeah, I've been feeling Uranus because it's affecting me in my rising sign, so I've been feeling it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, it's also I don't know if you how you guys have been feeling, but I think this Mercury in retrograde is going to be a doozy. Um, Everyone I know has been having like super weird classic Mercury in retrograde stuff, and like they were having it like before the pre-shadow, and just been like, I don't know, we're not even at the full retrograde yet, and I feel like people are feeling it. So
Major tech issues, computer issues, phone issues, just any form of communication.
yeah, so don't get a new computer until July. Don't like do your major computer overhaul until July. Like my sister wanted to like send all these contracts out, and I was like, girl, you should just wait until July if you can. I was like, or like get a lawyer to look at everything. So it's like usually I'm like, oh, like just pay attention, like you'll be fine. But I just feel like this one is gonna be a doozy. So I would just like
I do.
well,
I do also, and double check the email before you send it. Double check the text message before you send it.
yeah, just like assume that there's going to be miscommunication. And the other thing with Mercury in retrograde that I highly suggest for this one is um giving yourself more time. So, like don't try and do like back to back to back meetings. Like give yourself that 15-minute break in between because like they will run late.
So how do you think why do you think that this retrograde in Gemini is going to be so intense?
I don't know. Like I've just been feeling it. I think it's because it's in Gemini, which is like Mercury's home sign.
Right.
I think there's been like some sensitivity in Gemini because last year we had the Venus retrograde in Gemini. I think that like Jupiter is going to be trining Gemini. Um, I just think like Gemini's like getting and the nodes are there, so like I just think like Gemini's sensitive and like primed right now. And the eclipses are happening in Gemini and Sagittarius. So it's like, I just think there's like a lot of Gemini activity.
And we
And
just had that super full moon in Scorpio. Was that intense or what?
yeah. Well, I think that these next ones in Gemini and Sagittarius are also going to be intense.
Oh my goodness.
All right. All right. So I think that's all I have to say. So I'm just going to stop recording. So, ooh, did I stop? Yeah. Did I stop recording?